What's today, the 10th? The 10th of Tammuz? In 7 days, next Shabbat, is the 17th of Tammuz. 17th of Tammuz is a fast day, and it's the beginning of Bein HaMetzarim. And you got to be extremely careful. Starts on the 17th of Tammuz. You need to be extremely careful, starting next Shabbat and then for the next 3 weeks, from the 17th of Tammuz to the 9th of Av, because people are going to be driving very badly, and there's going to be accidents abounding all over the place because of the heat. And it's a very dangerous time. Maybe I'll get to talk about it more next week, but it's a time when God plans to release a couple of demons that have specific names in the scriptures, Ketev and Meriri, destruction and bitter destruction. And it can be a very, very dangerous time. Why? Because it's a picture of the birth pangs. And we have to live through the picture of the birth pangs to understand the birth pangs. It's part of Judaism. It's a big part of Judaism. Just like all the festivals that everybody gets all excited about, you should get just as excited about the fast days, because God built them, He created them, and they're there to learn about Him and about His kingdom from. So perhaps we'll talk more about that next week. So, for this week, we are in a Torah portion that we're only going to look at one little tiny part of. And this is probably going to be the biggest teaching I've given, the longest teaching I've given in a couple years. I'm going to try to keep it short, but it's a long teaching because there's a lot to look at. And there's a lot of water in this Torah portion, but it's not good water. It's bad water, but then the last one looks like bad water and it turns into good water. So this is the Torah portion in which is Miriam dies. Now, the water that they got in the desert, in the city of Kadesh, which is Petra, for 38 years, that water came from the Ain Miriam, the well of Miriam. And it was a rock. And it followed them from Mount Sinai to Kadesh. That's what it says in 1 Corinthians, that the rock followed them. But the well was a rock, and it was the well of Miriam. Miriam is the one who prophesied to this rock and said, the words are in English, "Spring up, O well." And people read that and they're like, okay, and she's singing about it, "Spring up, O well, la-di-da." No, she was prophesying for water to come out of the rock, and it did for 38 years. And in this Torah portion, she dies. And in this Torah portion, that well dries up. So the people start complaining 1 day later, and Moshe gets really mad at them, and he cusses them out, and he strikes the rock twice, and a miracle happens, and water comes out of a different rock. And because of what he did, God says you can't go into the land. You can't go into the land because of what you did. That's a huge, huge machlochet, which is an argument in Judaism. And my dad stumbled over that. It caused him almost to stop believing in God. Because he was like, well, Moses was like a perfect guy. He makes one mistake and God says you can't go into the land. Nah, I don't want that kind of God. That's how Jews are. That's how they talk. So we talked about it, and he was like, that sort of makes sense. So it's a big argument among Jews. It makes many of them stop believing in God. Because, he hits a rock, he yells, he cusses them out a little bit, and so God says, sorry, I'm done with you, the most humble man on the planet. If that happens to him, what chance do we have? And a lot of people think like that. So there's a lot to do with water. The water we're going to look at is dead cow ash water. That's the water we're going to look at, which sounds disgusting, and it is disgusting. But then it ultimately becomes really, really, really good. So the name of the teaching is The Ultimate Uncleanness to the Ultimate Joy. It's a total flop. like as evil and ugly and disgusting, at least among Jews, as unclean and gross as you can get, turning it into something that is the ultimate joy. That's what we're going to look at. All right, so we're in Numbers, Bamidbar, chapter 19. Adonai spoke to Moshe and Aharon, saying, this is the chukat. This is it makes it possessive, chukat. So say, and you're going to say this a lot, say chok. Not hok. Chok. You got to work up the spit. Chok. So the name of the Torah portion is chukat, which is possessive. Chok, chukat, plural is chukim. So that's the word we're going to focus on, is chok. This is the chok of the Torah. There's a bunch of chukim in the Torah. Anybody know how many? Huh? Anybody know how many? No. Take a guess how many chukim there are in the... 50's close. 50's close. There's something like 60-some. Just the chukim. Now, there's different categories of Torah. There's mitzvot, set up things. There's mishpatim, judgments that have to do with money and making judgments, stuff like that. A chok is something that just sounds really weird, like the festivals. There's no rational reason for it. You shall not mix linen and wool. Why? You shall kill a cow and then mix up its ashes, ground it down to ash, and throw it in water and sprinkle it on people. Why? It's so weird. So all the weird ones, those are chukim. And there's a lot of them. But this says this is the chok of the Torah. This is the quintessential weird Torah, quote, law. This is the one that everybody, all in Judaism go, you gotta be kidding me. This is ridiculous. And if you look at it rationally, you should say that. If you question it, and you should question it, because it just sounds stupid. But it says, God said, this is the chok of the Torah, which Adonai established, saying, speak to Bnei Israel that they bring to you a para adoma tamima. It means a tom or tomim means perfect. It doesn't mean, I don't know how to say translate, spotless, or it's literally perfect. It's what God said about Jacob before he was born. God said that Jacob was an ish tam, a perfect man. And he was a liar and a thief and a jerk, but he was an ish tam because he was Israel. And this is like that, only it's a red heifer like that. A red heifer tamima, on which there is no blemish and on which has never come a yoke. You plural, not you singular, you plural, talking about Moses and Aharon, shall give her to Eleazar the Cohen. He will take her outside the camp and slaughter her before his face. Now, when it says before his face, half the Jews say, okay, it's before God's face, and half the Jews say it's before Moses' face, or Eleazar's face. We'll talk about that. Then Eleazar the Cohen is to take some of the blood on his finger and sprinkle it 7 times straight before. Not like generally in front of, but directly straight before Nochach, the tent of meeting. The heifer is burned before his face. There it is again. Whose face? God's face or Eleazar's face? Her hide, her flesh, her blood, her refuse. The Cohen is to take cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet and cast them into the burning of the cow. That is so dumb. What is it, like a magic formula? It better be cedar, and it better be hyssop, and it better be scarlet, and it better be the right kind, it better be the right amount, and you mix it together, and then you throw it in a burning cow, and it's going to magically do something. That's why it's a chok. Jews read this and say, you got to be kidding me. That is just stupid. Christians read it and they go, it is the holy word of God. So it's there to show us God's holiness. And I go, as a Jew, how? And they go, well, It is holy. Okay, great. How? It is holy unto the Lord. Wonderful. How? And it's a merry-go-round that goes around and around and around and never gives an answer unless you know what each element is. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at each and every element, let the Bible define it, and go, okay, what is it saying? What does it look like? And it is absolutely phenomenal. Not only is it phenomenal, it's a big joke. It's a big joke. And if you don't laugh at the end of this teaching, there's something wrong with you. Because it really is a joke. And Yeshua pulled a big joke on people with it. That's right. So then it says, take cedar wood, hyssop, scarlet, cast him into the burning. Afterward, the Kohen is to wash his clothes, bathe his flesh in water, and afterward he can come back into the camp. The Kohen will be unclean until evening. Also, the one who burns it, which is a different person from Eleazar, is to wash his clothes and cleanse his flesh with water, and he will be unclean until evening. A clean man is to, and here's another guy, a clean man is to gather up the ashes of the heifer and put them in a clean place outside the camp. They are to be for the congregation of Bnei Israel to use as sprinkling water for sin offering, chatat. That is literally a sin offering. There is no sin offering associated with this at all. But God says this is water for sprinkling that is for sin offering. This is where the whole thing takes a left turn. Continuing, the one who gathers the heifer's ashes is also to wash his clothes. So we got 3 guys as well, and be unclean until evening. It will be a permanent statute for Bnei Israel and for the ger, for the outsider, for the stranger, however that's translated for your Bible, within them, betocham. It doesn't say among them, it's within them, the Gentile who lives inside in Israel. Whoever touches the corpse of all human souls, lekol nefesh adam, all human souls is the way it's written in Hebrew. Whoever touches the corpse of all human souls will be unclean for 7 days. He is to purify himself on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, then he'll be clean. But if he doesn't purify himself on the 3rd and the 7th days, he's not clean. Anyone touching the corpse in a human soul, now it says benefesh ha'adam, in the soul of man, a corpse in a human soul, who does not purify himself defiles Adonai's tabernacle. And that person will be cut off from Israel. Because the cleansing water was not sprinkled on him, he's unclean, and his uncleanness will remain on him. So, if you touch anything of a dead body, you cannot go to the tabernacle, and therefore you cannot go to the temple. So, listen to me carefully. When the temple is reestablished in the kingdom, and it will be reestablished in the kingdom, no one who is unclean from touching anything dead of a human, any dead corpse or body part, or walking on a grave, or going near a dead person, or if somebody dies in the house that you're in, or anything like that, or going to a funeral and walking up to the corpse. We don't do that in Judaism. Ever, 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 ever. And especially not the Kohanim, the priests. We don't get near a dead body, ever. Unless you're washing the body for burial, which is a big mitzvah. It's a big good deed. Or if you're preparing the body, or if you're carrying the body to the grave. Other than that, we do not get near a dead body. Because it makes you unclean in a way that you cannot approach God at all. Now, there's no other sin that does that. Like, you can be unclean from all kinds of things. And you go up to the mikvah, right before, right in front of the temple. You go in the mikvah, and you can go in before God. But not with touching anything having to do with death. There's no way around it. You cannot approach God, period. Why? That's why it's a chok. And that's the right question. The question was why. that's the right question to ask. That's what I ask. Why? Why is that one sin such a big deal? And then how do you get rid of it with a dead cow, with cedar, hyssop, and what was the other one? Scarlet wool and water. And that somehow magically gets rid of it? Why? Okay, so that's what we're going to look at. And so by the end of the teaching, you're going to have the answer to that. That is the question. All right. So let's talk about chok. I absolutely do not believe the way the Jewish community believes about a chok. I don't believe what the sages said about it. I don't believe, and these are my heroes. The sages, I don't believe anything anybody says except the sages. I don't trust anybody except the sages. I don't learn from anybody except the sages. And if somebody says something in line with what the sages said, ooh, baby, I'm all ears. But if they don't, I don't trust it. I don't trust them on this. They're wrong. This is the one thing in Judaism that they missed about a chok. Because here's what they say. I'm giving you 4 different little passages here to help you understand what they say. Chukim, decrees. These are the mitzvot that transcend rational reason. Unlike both mishpatim and edut. The quintessential chok is the mitzvah of the red heifer. Okay, yeah, it transcends rational reason. Like, what, are you making magic formulas? Okay, yeah, I agree with that. Here's another one. What does the phrase Chukat HaTorah mean? Usually the word Torah is understood as the entire Chumash, the entire Old Testament, or the entire 5 books of the Torah. While chok is understood as a law without reason, and hence the laws of Para Adumah being the example par excellence of a chok that doesn't make any sense, and then he goes on to say this. That means the whole Torah doesn't make sense. And so we just go, yes, sir, I shall obey. And that I absolutely do not agree with. It's wrong. It's not biblical. It's not in line with what the Holy Spirit does, says, gave, showed. It's just wrong. It is the curse of the law. And both Christians and Jews are under the curse of the law. Both Christians and Jews. And when I say under the curse of the law, I'm not talking about how can a Christian be under the curse of the law. They do Sunday Sabbath. That's the curse of the law. They eat pork because they say we're freed from the law. That's the curse of the law. Anything that is not a picture showing, we'll talk more about this, anything that is not a picture that gives us understanding is the curse of the law. And that's what thinking about a chok like this leads to. This is the decree of the Torah. This is by a guy named Rabbi Ben A. And he calls himself Rabbi Ben A because he was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And all of his teachings have to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. So he calls himself Rabbi Ben A. This is a decree of the Torah. Not only means that this particular commandment is a supra-rational decree, but that really the entire Torah transcends logic. And that while some commandments may make more sense to us than others, all of God's laws are ultimately beyond the pale of mortal comprehension. Now that is true, but then they go, yes, sir, I shall obey thee. And that is wrong. We see that there are certain commandments that just don't make mortal sense. Now here's where they really start opening up and talking like Jews. This guy, Nechoma Greisman. Listen to how he says it. Try as you will never find a rational reason for those commandments. Never. Those commandments are called chukim, laws, statutes, decrees. If you like it, if you don't like it, this is the Jewish way, take it or leave it. Okay? So that's where the thinking leads to. That is so, so wrong. God gave all of his Torah so that we could know him. And if you do something in obedience, that is idolatry. That's what that verse said in the Kabbalah. If you do something, anything in obedience, That is idolatry. So if you're not doing Judaism, whatever pieces you do, to learn from it, you're an idolater. And you're doing Judaism as an idolater. And it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Gentile. If you do something, one little thing, and it gives you some revelation, that's the way it's supposed to work. It worked. It's supposed to talk to you, preach to you, teach you, instruct you. You got it, and that's wonderful. But that's not what this is saying. This is saying, take it or leave it. Do it. Yes, sir, I shall obey thee. And that is wrong. While some commandments may make more sense to us than others, all of God's laws are ultimately beyond the pale of mortal comprehension. That's true. That is true. We cannot understand God. Would you agree or not? I mean, you can figure out what something means, like if he says a red heifer. You can look up all the verses that will define why he's using that character. But why he came up with it, I don't know. And neither does anybody else. Say it again. In the kingdom, we're going to know. Because it says in the kingdom, we're going to teach. How can you teach it if you don't know? So in the kingdom, we are going to know. And the more we do, hold on just a sec, the more we do, the more we're going to know in the kingdom. We're not going to have a body that is a corpse, carrying around a corpse that will tie us down so that we can't understand. In the kingdom, we will understand. What'd you say? Yes, we're supposed to search for it like a treasure now, but that doesn't know we're going to know. We're not going to. Read it again. All of God's laws are ultimately beyond the pale of mortal comprehension. That means we cannot understand it mortally, humanly, mortal. This corpse cannot understand it, period. Your spirit, it'll catch glimpses, but not this body. But in the kingdom, we're not going to be shackled by it, so we will. Ecclesiastes 7 says this. All this is what Solomon said. All this I have proved in wisdom. I got all this wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far away from me. Now, the word far away is rechoka. Say rechoka. Does that sound familiar? It's got the word chok in it. Chok, yeah. Rechoka, memini, to me. Rechok is the word to be distant from, to be far away from, to go away far. This is the word for divorce in Judaism. To put away is the way it's translated. And he was minded to put her away in the King James about Joseph and Miriam. This is the word, rechok. He wanted to put her far away. To be distant, to wander away, to move far off, to remove. Now it has in it the word chok, which means just the opposite. That which is established or definite, absolutely definable and definite. And yet, in Judaism, a chok is looked at as just the opposite. You cannot define it, you cannot understand it. It's fuzzy, it's murky, it's mysterious. There's no defined boundaries for it. Just the opposite. Chok means a boundary. It means a definition. It means a clear picture. Chukah. Chukah, that which is established or defined, usually defined as a law, an ordinance, a statute. This also comes from chakak. And guess what chakak means? To cut, to hack into, to carve, to delineate. You know what delineate means? Anybody know what delineate means? Define with incredible precision. That's what delineate means. To define with precision, like a blueprint, or to define. Now look at this. It means to carve, to draw, or to paint. Is that not a picture? And yet, you can't know why. So just do it in obedience. How stupid is that? That's stupid. That makes no sense. To say, you don't know why you're doing it, and God doesn't want you to know why you're doing it, just do it to obey him. That is stupidity. That's shtut in Hebrew, stupidity. Like just to shut your brain off. But in Judaism, that's not the way it's set up. The way it's set up is you want to delineate, you want to define, you want to pick at the details and figure it out. That's a chakak. To hack a boundary into the ground. So when you hear the word chok, what I want you to picture in your head is a guy chopping into the ground a boundary. That's what I picture in my head. And it helped me a lot. Because, you know, I hear somebody, this is the ultimate chok, and they're saying we can't know what it means. I immediately picture the opposite. Hey, look, he's chopping a picture in the ground. Go look at the picture and look at what it looks like. That's what I picture in my head. And it helped a lot. To decree, to ordain, to determine or appoint. These are all words about specificity. Not murky, muddy, fuzzy, maybe. These are all very, very definite, and that's what a chok is. So we better figure out what it means. Now, this is why I wrote the pictures book. The pictures book says just the opposite of what the ultimate chok is defined as in Judaism. It's just the opposite. It's a picture. Everything in Judaism is a chok, because that's what the guy said. If this is the ultimate chok, is the ultimate statute, so to speak, in the Torah, that means the whole Torah is like the chok. And if the entire Torah is like the chok, it's defined, it's definite, it's clear, it's hacking a boundary into the ground. It's a drawing, it's a painting, it's a sculpture. It's something that you can look at and it talks to you. Isn't that awesome? That's why I wrote the pictures book. I got a whole bunch of stuff here that I got written in the pictures book. I'm just going to read one little part of it. This is true. This is from the 13 Attributes of Faith from Maimonides. I think it's number 3. It says, I believe that God is non-corporeal, no human body, no flesh. God does not have flesh, and indescribable. Indescribable. That means you cannot possibly put into words properly God, or really anything about God. God cannot be described. I believe this is true. God is utterly impossible to understand. God cannot be described properly with human words, but he can be described in a picture, a metaphor. And those metaphors can be described with similes. God is like thus and such. The kingdom of heaven is like thus and such. Angels are like thus and such. The day of the Lord is like this or that. This is how rabbis have always taught. So, that's the purpose of Judaism, is to have a very definite picture, like tzitzit, that you do, and then it talks to you, and you get understanding of God. And if you do it without that understanding of God, that, I am sorry to tell you, is idolatry. So if you do something Jewish and I say, why are you doing that? And you can't, recite back to me something amazing that it said to you, you're doing it as idolater, as idolatry. As an idolater doing idolatry. Because it's not the way God set it up. You're going, yes, sir, I'm obedient unto thee. Give me a gold star and a pat on the head. You've already got your reward. But Judaism doesn't work like that. So let's go back and let's talk about the tamima para aduma. The para aduma tamima. A perfect red heifer on which there is no blemish and on which there has never come a yoke. You, plural, shall give her to Eleazar the Cohen. He will take her outside the camp and slaughter her before his face. Now this is, they've been trying to raise a red heifer for a few generations. This has been going on since the 60s. They might. They're not sure yet. This happens every year. Every year when this comes up during Chukat, somebody says, because they saw on the internet, they got one. And then it fails to come through. And here's why. Where it says tamima, anybody know what that means? Perfect? Do you know what the definition of that, what the chok is for that? What is it, Ruby?
It can't have a yolk when it's born. It can't have any irk. It cannot have any blemishes like defects, birth defects, or anything. It cannot have any tags, no vaccinations.
Okay, you're saying all the secondary, tertiary level stuff. There's one thing that all the rabbis say from this word tamima.
White hairs.
Any hairs. It cannot have two hairs that are not red. That's the primary thing that they get from that word tamima. It can't even have two hairs that are not red. They can't be gray, they can't be white, they can't be black, they can't be brown, nothing. It's got to be red. Also, there has to be a reddish tint to the hooves and the horns, if it has horns. It has to have a reddish tint to the hooves. So, it's got to be perfect. It cannot have any internal defects. How they figure that out, I don't know, but that's what they say. And so, here's a guy, once again, they do this every year. They go out, they raise red heifers, and they go out and they examine it. You see what he's got in his hand here? It's a magnifying glass. He's checking for any hairs that aren't red. That's what they do. Now it says, slaughter her before his face. This comes up 3 times. And the question is, whose face? Eleazar's face or God's face? God. All right, so here's the answer. Here's all 3. You shall give her to Eleazar the Cohen. He'll take her outside the camp and slaughter her before his face. Sprinkle it 7 times straight before Nochach, the tent of meeting, and there's our cue as to whose face it is. The heifer is burned before his face. So this word Nochach is what tells us the answer. Straight in front of his face. Well, Gentiles are calling this, and they shouldn't, but they do. They're calling this the red heifer bridge. This is not a red heifer bridge. It just happened to be the bridge over the Kidron Valley to which they took the red heifer up the Mount of Olives to the red heifer site, where they killed and slaughtered the red heifer on an altar that was there, and then they built a pyre of wood and they burnt it there. But look where it's going, and this is exactly how it was. It went directly east, directly to the front of the temple, which is God's face. So, whose face is it slaughtered in front of? God's face. And it says it 3 times. And here you can see from a side view, see that yellow line there? It goes directly from the red heifer site right to the front of the temple. Now, this bridge is really, really important. We're going to get to that a little later. Yes, ma'am.
Why doesn't, when it says his face, why is it like capitalized to confirm God?
There's no capitals in Hebrew.
No, but in the actual writing,
You can do whatever you want. There's no capitals in Hebrew. If you want to make it capital, make it capital. I wrote this. I'm the one. God didn't make the slide, Becca. I made the slide. I kept it small on purpose so that everybody wouldn't jump and go, "It's God because it's capital." See what I did there? Okay. So now, after he takes it up in front of God's face, directly east, way up on the Mount of Olives. By the way, the red heifer site is 0.9 miles from the front of the temple. Anybody know what 0.9 miles is in the Bible, in Judaism? Say it again. Very good. A Sabbath day's journey. 2,000 cubits. It's the distance between which the ark and Israel, the camp of Israel, when they were going into the land, crossing the Jordan River, that's how far God said to make that space. It's a Sabbath day's journey. Now, we're going to define each of the things that went into this little play so that you can understand the characters. Cedar is erez. Say erez. Not eretz, which is land, erez with a zayin. Leviticus 14, for the one with sara'at, as for the living bird, he shall take it, and the cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop, and this is a different chok. This is for the not leper, the one with sara'at, which is translated leprosy. And it's exactly the same stuff. Cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet. Only in this instance, you dip those things in the living bird blood. I'm sorry, in the blood of the bird that was killed over living water. And you did that with the bird too. So you got the bird and the cedar and the scarlet and the hyssop. And you dip all those in the blood water of the bird that was killed. Now, it sounds exactly like para aduma, the red heifer. Doesn't it? Same elements. Only in this case, it cleanses those with sara'at. All right? But it's cedar wood. 1 Kings 6, 9, and 18. So, Solomon built the house and finished it, and covered the house with beams and planks of erez. There was erez inside the house, carved gourds and open flowers. Everything was erez in the house of God. Did you catch that? Everything was erez, was cedar in the house of God. There was no stone visible. All stones were covered up with erez, and they were decorated with beautiful pictures, sculptures. All right? So, the house of God, which is a picture of heaven, what's inside the house of God? Come on. What's inside the house of God? Cedar. In heaven. What's inside the house of God? Cedar. So yes, ma'am. No, the ark is made of acacia wood. Okay, Psalm 92. And here's why there's cedar covering the temple in heaven. The righteous person will flourish like the palm tree. He will grow like the cedar in Lebanon. Who will grow like a cedar? The righteous person. Yes, the tzaddikim. The righteous one will be a cedar. But look what it says. Planted in the house of the Lord. You can't plant a cedar in the temple. Why? What's on the floor in the temple? Stone. Right? There's no trees planted in the temple. But the righteous person is planted in the house of the Lord. In heaven. In heaven. And from those trees, the erez, from the righteous trees, comes the water, the Holy Spirit, that pours out into the whole earth. And then it says, they will flourish in the courts of our God. That's in heaven. So you got people like trees, and by the way, the erez was the tallest tree in the Middle East. I forgot to say that. It's the biggest tree in the whole Middle East. They still have them in Lebanon. They can't grow them in Israel for some reason. They just don't grow well. But they grow in Lebanon, 10 miles north. And they grow like crazy. But in Israel, for some reason, they can't get them to grow very well. But they were huge. Now, who sent the cedar trees to Solomon to build the temple? Hiram. Who was that? Anybody know who that is? Lumberjack. The lumberjack. The king of Tyre, which is Lebanon. So the king of Tyre sent trees down to Israel for them to build the house of God. All right? He didn't send them to Solomon. It does not say that. You know who he sent them to? David. Because remember, David is the one who collected everything to build the temple. And David was one who wrote the plans and designed the temple from what he saw in heaven, it says in 1 Chronicles 28. Or 29. So Solomon didn't have those sent to him. David had those sent for him to build the temple. And they were sent after God said, no, David, you're not going to build the house. And yet they were still sent to David. Because David prepared everything for the temple. So all those cedar trees are righteous people coming from the north down to build God's house. And these are the righteous. And they go back to heaven and be planted in the house of the Lord, populate the house of the Lord in heaven. Psalm 29. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. Yes, the Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon in pieces. Are the cedars of Lebanon good or bad? Are they good or bad people? Good. Come on, what do you think? Good or bad people? Okay. They're tzaddikim, they're good. They're the highest, they're the tallest, they're the biggest. Right? And God breaks them. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. The cedars of Lebanon are in the house of the Lord. They're not up in Lebanon. They're in the house of the Lord, and God breaks. So this is why I brought this verse, and I love this verse. I used to hate it because I didn't want God to break me. Now that I've been broken, I like the verse. Isn't that stupid? But that's the way it is. So God breaks all of his believers. Anybody know a verse that says that? It's in the New Testament, you should know. I'm a Jew here quizzing you on the New Testament. Come on, new believers, New Testament scholars, tell me where it says in the New Testament that God breaks every one of his children. Yeah, I know it. You got it. Right. Hebrews chapter 12, my New Testament scholar friends. Christians, you're supposed to know this. Hebrews chapter 12 says God disciplines, does musar, spanks, breaks every person who he loves. Every person who he loves. And it says, if you have not become a partaker of that discipline, you are not a child of his. You're a bastard. Okay, so you get one or the other. You get to be a bastard or you get to be beaten and broken. So God's voice is supposed to break us. If somebody's talking to you and disciplining you, you better listen. Because if you don't listen, then he's going to break you some other way, and it's going to be worse. And if you don't listen to that, then he's going to break you another way, which will be even worse. And it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So listen the first or second time to save yourself the trouble. Because I'm telling you, 100% of the time, it will happen. Because God disciplines all those whom he loves. So, if I were you, I'd embrace that scripture. And figure out and ask God, spare me the breaking and just give me the discipline. The musar, the spanking, and I'll listen. I didn't. I was broken, completely smashed by God, because I wouldn't listen over and over and over again. All right, I don't know what you're showing me, Doug. Oh, okay. 1 Kings chapter 4. And now this is the one that gives us like the scale on how to look at this. Solomon spoke about all kinds of stuff. It says he wrote all these songs, and he wrote all kinds of proverbs, and he was so wise, and he did this, and he did that. And then it says, and he spoke of trees. From the cedar in Lebanon, the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, all the way even to the hyssop that springs out of the wall. So what does it tell us? It tells us from the greatest to the least, right? From the greatest to the least. Therefore, the cedar is the greatest. It's the highest. It's the biggest tree in all the Middle East. What's the smallest? Hyssop. And what's weird is, it's about that tall, and God calls it an etz, a tree. A tree. It's not even a bush, right? But God looks at it as a small tree. The smallest of the trees. We'll get back to that. Here's where we're going to get back to it. Hyssop. Here's one way that hyssop looks. Hyssop can look many different ways. Can have a big purple flower on it that's tall. It can look like this. It can look, it's related to marjoram, sage, and oregano. So it can have slightly different looks. But this is what it says in the Mishnah in Para Aduma. Any hyssop bearing a special name is invalid for doing Para Aduma. Ordinary hyssop is valid. Now look at this. Greek hyssop, is that good or bad? Greek. Is Greek good or bad? Okay. Stibium hyssop. Stibium is black. They would get black makeup. The Egyptians, stibium was black makeup that they put in their eyes. Roman hyssop, is Roman good or bad? Okay. Or wild hyssop is invalid. Those are invalid. They're no good. You can't use them. They're the wrong what? Picture. Very good. They're the wrong picture. The prescribed rite of the hyssop is that the bunch shall contain 3 stalks bearing 3 buds. Does anybody remember? I told you why. Does anybody remember why? I told you why today. Why there were 3 stalks, 3 buds for the rite, the chok of Praduma. I told you. Nobody caught it? How many guys had to clean their clothes, go in the mikveh, and did the ritual? How many guys? 3. Eleazar, the priest, and then another person who's clean, and then another person who's clean. That's why 3. There's 3 all over this thing. How many things were thrown into the burning cow? 3. Hyssop, erez, and scarlet. There's 3s all over this thing. All over this sota. I'm sorry, all over this cloak. Said Rabbi Isaac Bar Tavlai, what's the significance of cedar wood and hyssop for the leper? He wants to know why. Uh-oh. Do you think the Jews liked that he questioned this? Yeah, no, they didn't like this. They didn't like it. It's a chok. You don't ask. Just because, that's right. But he asks, Rabbi Isaac Bar Tavlai, what's the significance of cedar wood and hyssop? They said to him. So obviously somebody knew to answer, but it doesn't say who. They said to him, you were proud like the cedar, and the Holy One, blessed be he, humbled you like this hyssop that is crushed by everyone. Crushed underfoot by everyone. It's nothing. Nobody cares about it. Just walk right over it. And again, this is the same picture as the voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. And look how it's written. I wonder if they're saying this to Rabbi Isaac Bar Tavlai. They say to him, you were proud, Rabbi, like the cedar. And the Holy One, blessed be he, humbled you like the hyssop. I can say that for me. And I hope you're in the process of God doing that with you. I hope. Because if you're not, I guarantee you 100% it's coming. It is coming. If you haven't let him do it yet, it is coming. There's no way around it. Because Judaism is all about anava, humility. Exodus 12. Take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood in the basin and apply some of the blood to the lintel and the 2 doorposts, the 2 mezuzot, and none of you go outside of the door of his house till evening. So this is the Passover evening. They've already slaughtered their animal, and they take some of the blood on hyssop. So hyssop is the delivery system for blood for salvation. That's all it is. It's the most humble. It's a little teeny tiny tree. It's the smallest tree. It's humble, and it's all it is a delivery system for blood. That's all it is. I have to think how to say this. In the standard normative church world or church system, the most important thing is salvation, especially non-denominational churches. They talk about it every week, every single week. Doesn't matter what they teach, they end up preaching salvation instead of what Judaism does, which is teaches us to get to know God so that we become more like him. Now, because of this focus, total and complete focus on blood, on salvation, and that's it. It's hard to see the hyssop as a lowly little delivery system for that. And that's all. That's all there is to it. But that's the reality. Getting somebody born again is less than a thimbleful of what God has. It's really nothing. All it is opening the door so you can get in the house. But it's not even the house. It's nothing. It's just a delivery system. It's like you get somebody's spirit alive, and then you ask, okay, now what? And the now what is what Judaism is for. How then shall we live? And the whole purpose is to become the best version of ourselves. You cannot become the best version of yourself unless you come the way God said to come. And that's through the curriculum of Judaism. And I've been asked more and more lately this question. What is Judaism? Where have you been? What is Judaism? What is Judaism? And, you know, for people who've been around this for years, you shouldn't be asking that. Now, when I went to Houston, there was a guy who just had no connection to Judaism whatsoever. He's born again. He's a believer. He wants to serve God. And he asked me in a totally different way. We were talking, and he stopped me, and he goes, wait, let me ask you a question. You keep saying Judaism. What is Judaism? And so I started from the beginning. And I told him what Judaism is. I told him about the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Midrashim, the prayers, the cycle of the festivals, the cycle of the year, the basics. And you know what he said when we were done? Oh, that makes sense. Oh, I feel so much better. That's what he said. I feel so much better. I think that's so cool. So salvation is just the beginning. It's just the very, very, very tip of the iceberg. But because of its incredible focus on it, all the other stuff gets lost. So this hyssop is very, very small. It's a delivery system for blood. Now here's another picture, another illustration of the delivery system of blood with hyssop. This is at the covenant at Mount Sinai. Hebrews 9:19 says this. Hebrews 9:19 lies to us. This is a lie. God lied in the Bible, or the writer of the Bible lied to us and wrote this nonsense. This is ridiculous. It's just nonsense. No, not even the translation. It's just it's just a lie. I'll show you what I mean. For when every mitzvah had been spoken by Moses to all the people according to the Torah, he took the blood of the calves and the goats and the water and the scarlet wool. There they are again. There they are again. The blood of calves and goats and water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people. 1.5 million people, up to 3 million. There's arguments about how many, but at least 1.5 million. Sprinkled the people with this blood, with hyssop. It's a lot of hyssop. So in this picture, you can see Moses happily that's Moses, throwing the blood on everybody. And here's a priest doing the same thing. Here's another ugly priest getting some blood from another ugly priest. Here's another priest back here, and they're all like surrounding in a circle, surrounding some of the people of Israel, throwing blood on them. So this is a lie. This is not in the Bible. took the blood of goats and water and scarlet wool and hyssop. It doesn't say that in the Bible. In Exodus 24, it says this: Then he sent young men of the sons of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed bulls as peace offerings. And Moses took half of the blood, put it in basins, and the other half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it, and the people listened. They all said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do it, and then we'll listen to it. Not we will hear you and obey and do it. We will do it, and then we'll hear. Then we'll listen. That's the covenant. So Moshe took the blood and took what and sprinkled it? It doesn't say a word about water or hyssop or, what's the other one? Scarlet wool. It doesn't say anything about that. It's a lie. Unless the writer of Hebrews is a Jew and knows Judaism. And he's quoting the Mishnah. He's not quoting Exodus. He's quoting the Mishnah and the Midrashim about the story in Exodus, which is a big deal because this means you cannot live by Bible only. You cannot go by what just the Bible says. You don't know what it means when it says anything unless you read it from the sages. You can't define yourself. We cannot define it ourselves. You can't go by Bible only. You must know how far it is from the altar to the porch. You have to know, how do you catch the blood in a sacrifice? It doesn't say it in the Bible, right? It doesn't say anything in the Bible about the hyssop has to have 3 heads and 3 stalks. All right, so it's not a lie, it's just quoting Judaism. And this is in the New Testament, my friends. It's in the New Testament, quoting Judaism, not the Bible. And it mushes them together, and all the Jews go, yeah, we know, because that's in the Midrashim. Yeah, well, that's what we do. We go, duh. I'm Jewish. I was a believer. I read this, and I said, what? I never saw that in Exodus, because I didn't know Judaism. So Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on people, and said, look, the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you in accordance to all these words. All right. That's a big deal. Hyssop is a big deal. It's a delivery system for salvation. Okay, now the Cohen is to take cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet and cast them into the burning of the cow. 1 Kings 4:3. He spoke of the trees from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even to the hyssop that springs out of the wall. This is the greatest to the least. Cedar is the righteous planted in the house of God. The house of God is made out of them. It's made out of righteous people. And hyssop is the lowest plant used to deliver the blood of salvation to cleanse sin. That's all it is. So next time you see somebody, quote, preaching salvation, you're going to have to change the way you think about it, maybe. Don't think of it as a big thing. Think of it as a tiny, tiny little thing. It's a thing. It's a good thing. But it's a small, humble thing. It's not a big deal. The big deal is, how do you become righteous? That's the big deal. And that's Judaism. That's the big deal. That's the erez, the cedar. And that's what Yeshua said. This is exactly what Yeshua said. What I just said is exactly what Yeshua said. Matthew 5:17 through 19. Do not think, and remember, he's talking to Jews. My fellow Jews, my fellow Pharisees, because Yeshua was a Pharisee, do not think that I came to abolish the Torah or the Nevi'im, the law or the prophets. I didn't come to do away with the law and the prophets. Why would any Jew even think that? A Jew would never think that. So obviously it doesn't mean what we think it means. Christians think that way, not Jews. Christ came to do away with the law. Jews don't think like that. They would never say to a rabbi, "Rabbi, you have come to do away with the Torah and the prophets." That's crazy. So it's got to mean something else. I'm telling you the truth. Until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter, that's a yod, or it's called a keter, which is a little crown on the letters. How many of the letters have crowns? Anybody know? Huh? Not most. Anybody remember? I can't remember the amount. I think it's 15, but I can't remember. It's a lot of them. So, from the yod, whoever, I'm sorry, let me read it again. Not even a yod or a crown of a letter will pass away from the Torah until all is accomplished. That is not talking about the crucifixion of Jesus. It's talking about everything prophesied in the Torah. It's not going to end until everything that it talks about comes. What is everything in the Torah talking about? The kingdom, the day of the Lord. So nothing of the Torah is done. Nothing. Until the day of the Lord comes, and then you can see it for real. You can see it with your own eyes. Until everything is accomplished. Therefore, now here's the part that I'm saying. Whoever nullifies, does away with, says it's ended, even the smallest of the mitzvot. Anybody know what the smallest of the mitzvot is? Very good. The bird's nest. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. The bird's nest in Leviticus. You don't take a mother bird and the baby bird from the nest on the same day. That's called Katan HaTorah, the smallest of the Torah, smallest of the mitzvot. Even if you do away with, nullify, even the smallest of the mitzvot, and then teachers others to do the same, don't do Judaism. What's going to be what happens to that person? That person is going to be called least in the kingdom. No, least. Not worst. Least. Smallest. Lowest in rank. You who are teachers know what I'm talking about. You got really dumb kids in class. And you got really smart kids in class, and you got a whole bunch in between. 14 letters have keter. Thank you. So, I mean, yeah, they're going to be in the kingdom. And again, I have to say it this way so you understand. All the pastors you've ever heard, even Messianic, that do away with the smallest of the mitzvot, and then obviously bigger ones. Yes, they'll be in the kingdom, but they're going to be least in the kingdom. And that's talking about rank. It's not the humble, the best. It's the worst. It's the awfulest. It's the stupidest. It's the ones who are going to end up sitting at your feet if you do Judaism. But whoever keeps the Torah, even the smallest, and then the bigger, and then teaches those Torot, those mitzvot, he will be called great in the kingdom. And every time I read this with Christians, they always do the same manipulation in their head. Every time. I've been doing this for this verse, for 37 years when I learned it. And every time I talk to Christians about this, they do the same thing. They immediately go, I want to be least. That is stupid. I want to be great in the kingdom. I want to be high in the kingdom. I want rank. I want to know what I'm doing. I want to know God. The ones who are higher in rank are more righteous. They know God better. So you can be cedar if you want to be, or you can be hyssop if you want to be. But the gauge to get to where you get is Judaism. So, how is it done? A clean man is to gather up the ashes of the heifer, put them in a clean place outside the camp. And this is what we're going to look at. A clean place outside the camp. They are to be for the congregation of Bnei Israel to use as sprinkling water for sin, for chatat. Now, chatat is a sin offering. Sin offering. Water of a dead cow is for a sin offering? That's like not even close to anything real. That's weird. It makes no sense whatsoever. It makes perfect sense. Well, you're a lot smarter than I am, because that makes no sense to me. A chatat is done with an animal. Part of it is eaten by the priests. The blood is sprinkled on the altar. It has to be sacrificed north of the altar. Blood has to be caught. Part of it splashed above the red line on the altar for a chatat. Then the rest of it is poured out at the base of the altar. The offer goes on and on and on and on and on. None of that is apparent here. None of that is done here. It's just like, getting an animal, burning it, and throwing some junk into it. It will be a permanent statute forever for Bnei Israel and for the Gentiles among them. Whoever touches the corpse of all human souls, kol lakol nefesh adam, of all the soul of Adam, of all the soul of Adam. Now here's where it's going to take a left turn on you if you don't hang on. You're going to get lost. But this is really the bottom line of the teaching. Of all the soul of Adam is what makes the person unclean and has to be sprinkled with this water. Whoever touches a corpse of all human soul will be unclean for 7 days. He's to purify himself on the third and the seventh. Anyone touching the corpse in a human soul who does not purify himself defiles the tabernacle and therefore the temple. The cleansing water wasn't sprinkled on him. Okay, so it's one of the festivals. We'll say Shavuot. And we're going to all go up to the festival at the temple for Shavuot. But your dad died, and you became unclean from that death. When did it happen? Well, it happened 3 months ago. You can't go up to the temple. Why? Well, you didn't have the water sprinkled on you from the red heifer. Well, I can't even go up there? No. Yeah, but there's water up there. No, you can't even go up there. You were supposed to have it sprinkled before you came up. Okay, so how does that happen? Remember, it says you gather up the ashes of the heifer and put them in a clean place outside the camp, so that before you go up, you get sprinkled. That's where we're headed. So here's what Rashi says. And place them, the water with the ashes, outside the camp. He divided it into 3 parts. One was on the Mount of Olives. One was subdivided among all the watches. Now, when it says water, it's talking about a pretty big container. It starts out in a small container, and then it's put in a big container. And they're beautiful. These containers are gorgeous. They're made out of stone, and they're beautiful. One of them is on the Mount of Olives. One was divided among all the watches. How many watches were there? Do you know?
12, right?
No, not 12. 24. One every 2 weeks. Watches means, the watches are the courses. It's the mishmarim, which is the courses of the priests and the Levites. All right, so that's what it's referring to when it says watches. And there's 24 of them. Then there was one put on the rampart surrounding the temple area. That was right outside the court of the women on a raised platform that's 10 cubits wide that the whole temple area sits on, 15 feet wide. And so as you're coming up to the temple area itself, that's the rampart. It's up 3 steps. It's not very high. It's like this. It's just like this platform. The one given to the watches, this is the one we're interested in, was outside the courtyard, allowing access to it for the inhabitants of outlying cities. Now, I read that, and it sounds like it's just like outside the court, it's up on the Temple Mount. But then how do I get to it if I'm unclean? Because that's not what it means. It sounds like that, but it's not what it means. Whoever needed to purify himself, The one on the Mount of Olives was for the high priest to sanctify from it for use with the other red cows each year, or each time they needed a red cow, which was not every year. The one put on the rampart was kept as a keepsake, as it says, it shall be kept as a keepsake for the congregation of Israel. All right, so we know it's divided into three. There's three again. There's three again. That water is divided into three parts. A clean man is to gather up the ashes of the heifer and put them in a clean place outside the camp. How was this done? Another guy, not Eleazar the priest, another one would, after, all the burning, by the way, that pyre, that funeral, that wood pyre is this tall. It's huge. And it burns for a few hours and it reduces it to ash. And then he has to go in there and pick through the bones and ash and get rid of the wood ash and just get the ash of the animal. I don't know how you do that. And then he has to get it and separate it, and then he gets a mortar and pestle and grinds the bones down if they're not completely ground up. And all of that mixture, all that stuff, is then put into a little container of water, and then that's delivered to a whole bunch of priests who then fill the vessels with water, a bunch of vessels, and then they distribute it where it needs to go. So it's a big process. A clean man is to gather up the ashes of the heifer and put them in a clean place outside the camp, to use as sprinkling water for chatat, for sin. Anyone touching the corpse of all corpse of Adam's soul. This is where it takes a left turn. Death is sin. Now, those of you who are shaking your head, yeah, good. A lot of people I say that to, or have said that to, and they're like, what? Death is sin. Death, no, don't take it farther than that. Death is sin. Death itself is sin. Adam sinned, and what happened? Death came into the world. There was no death. That which is alive forever, right? There was no such thing as death. No animals died. There was no such thing as entropy. That means winding down. There was no entropy anywhere in the whole universe. There was no entropy in any energy ever, anywhere. If something was alive, made by God, it lived forever, including hyssop and alligators and everything. Everything. If it lived forever. Until sin. And immediately came mat, death. Not the wages of, don't go New Testament on me. The wages of sin is death. Okay, just death is sin. There was no death until sin. They're the same thing. This is why everything winds down and dies, because sin. Now, none of the sacrifices could take that away. None of them. They weren't meant to take them away. Only one could take that away. What was it? What was it? The red heifer. You took that left turn on me, guys. There's only one sacrifice that could take that sin of death away. What was it? The red heifer. Paraduma. It dealt with, it removed magically the effects of Adam's sin. That's what it's there for. And you may have to do it every time you touch death, or get near death, or step on a grave, or somebody dies near you. There's a transfer of sin from the death. Death is sin. Death is sin. Adam's sin is death. They're the same thing. Now, I told you, it takes a left turn here. You got to really hang on to figure this out. I have always known this because I'm a Jew. I never stood on a grave. And this was before I figured out, that my family are Kohanim, we're priests. I never got near a grave. And then, friends in El Paso, they would die, and they have a rosary, and then they have a viewing. People walk up and they're this close to the dead body, and they're crying, and some of them get on the coffin. You don't do that in Judaism. That is disgusting. Yes, in Judaism, you bury the dead before the sun goes down the next day. In one day, you got to get that body in the ground. Because nobody's supposed to get near it or touch it or anything. Now, you can become unclean for your family, for your close family. But that's it.
What about the ones that are supposed to prepare the body?
They don't become unclean. They're doing a mitzvah. The ones who prepare the body and say the prayers, they're like the priests in this situation. And they do become unclean, but it's not like a big major thing. It's a lower level uncleanness. But this is the highest level of uncleanness there is. The effects of death. Never heard this before, did you? Death is sin. So next time you're invited to a wake or to a viewing or to a rosary, that's how they do it here, or whatever, think carefully about what you're doing. Think about the transfer of uncleanness and what that picture is trying to teach you, because that's what it is. And both times that it talks about the effects of death, it uses this dude's name, Adam. It's the sin of Adam that makes people unable to approach God. And it's not the blood of Christ that gets rid of it. We'll talk more about that. Anyone touching the corpse of a human soul who does not purify himself defiles the tabernacle. The cleansing water wasn't sprinkled on him. So you got a problem. You got, we'll say, 3 million people in Israel. And all of them have to go up, all the men have to go up for for Paso, unleavened bread, Chag HaMatzah, Shavuot, and Sukkot 3 times a year, plus whenever they want to go. You can't go up if you've touched anything dead. If you've come in contact with the sin of death, which is why I keep saying it makes no sense that it's a sprinkling water for chatat, for sin offering. What sin? The sin of death. All right, so place the water with the ashes, outside the camp. So here's the outside the camp. So we're going to look at 3 New Testament verses. Don't get lost here. I want you to, try to keep focusing on what I've said so far. Don't let it go and then go New Testament on me and forget everything I said. Try to stay focused, anchored to what I've taught you so far. Romans 5. Now remember, this is a Jew writing a Jewish book to Jews and Gentiles who were doing Judaism. So that as sin reigned in death, who reigns? What kind of person reigns? A king. Sin is the king because of death. Sin is the king because of death. It's the sin of death. Sin reigned in death so that grace could reign. Now grace will become a king through righteousness to eternal life through Yeshua the Messiah. Romans 6. Don't you know? Why would he say that? Don't you know? I guess they didn't know. Don't you know that the one to whom you present yourselves as a slave to submit to, you're slaves to that same one whom you submit to, either of sin to death, resulting in death. Why does he keep saying sin, death, sin, death? Because death is a sin. Sin to death, or of submission to righteousness. Jacob 1, another Jew writing a Jewish book to Jews. Then when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin. Sin, when it's run its course, brings death. That's simple. Death is sin. Now, he's writing this in the context of Jews. And Jews all go, yeah, that's why we don't get near it. That's sinful. It's unclean. It's the highest level of tumah, uncleanness. There are many, many levels of uncleanness. It's not just like unclean and clean. Like there's small levels, little levels of uncleanness. You just wash your clothes, you go in the mikveh, and you're fine tomorrow. But this is, you never get rid of this, ever, unless parah adumah is sprinkled on you. You get what I'm saying?
How do we solve that today?
Yes. How do we solve that today? That's where we're going. But I'm looking at your faces, and it looks like you're not tracking with me. Do you understand what I'm saying? That this is, you can do all the Judaism you want. You can do all the Christianity what you want. You cannot remove this uncleanness unless you have parah adumah sprinkled on you. You'll never approach God. You can get away with a lot of uncleanness, but this you cannot. When people get born again, and it just amazes me that I as a Jew have to explain this to Christians. I thought they would have to explain this to me. But I've been doing this for 42 years, and I always end up explaining to Gentiles, to Christians, what it means to be born again. I've only met like 2 or 3 Christians in my entire life who know what it meant to be born again. Everybody else is confused about it. It's very, very simple. You're born with a dead spirit. Yes? Why? Because of who? Okay, because of the sin of death of Adam. 1 Corinthians 15 says that Yeshua became a life-giving spirit. And he makes your spirit alive when you're born again. That's it. There's nothing else about faith, about belief, about doing anything. Nothing. He makes your spirit alive. And that's all being born again is. That's why I say it's hyssop. It's the smallest, humblest, tiny little thing. Okay. Then how do you live? How then shall we live? That's what Judaism is for. But salvation, all it is having your spirit made alive. Doesn't do anything else. Doesn't make you smart. Doesn't make you spiritual. Doesn't make you anything. It simply wakes your spirit up so that you can have God talk to you if you want. But that's it. He's a life-giving spirit. He's called the second Adam. Now that is the sprinkling of the waters of the red heifer. That is the sprinkling of parah adumah. That was going to happen in 3 years in Yeshua when he began his ministry. In 3.5 years, that was going to happen. And so what's the very first thing he did? He took all of parah adumah and flipped it on its head and told a big giant joke about it. And nobody gets the joke. Nobody gets the joke. Everybody's like, oh, this is the beginning of miracles in Cana of Galilee. And everybody's like, it's so holy, it's amazing. No, it's not. It's a joke. It's funny. Well, we'll see. Place that water outside the camp. Outside the camp. He divided it into three parts. The one divided among the watches. Now, what about the watches? What's the watches? There were 24 watches of priests and Levites. Every watch served for 1 week. They have a watch for 2 weeks, but they serve 1 week because they have to get to Jerusalem, then get back from Jerusalem. So they served for 1 week, and then they served at all the festivals. But where did they live? Where did they live? Where did the priests and Levites live? You think they all lived in Jerusalem? No. All right, so we're going to read this story of what Yeshua did. How Yeshua used the chok of the Torah. Yeah. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. The mother of Yeshua was there, and both Yeshua and his Talmidim were invited to the wedding. When the wine ran out, the mother of Yeshua said to him, "They have no wine." And Yeshua said to her, "What is that between you and me, woman? My time is not yet." What? What a jerk. God, that's how you talk to your mom? You kiss your mom with that mouth? What a jerk. What a stupid answer. Yeah, I translate it nicely. I translate it the way it is in Hebrew. There's 3 other verses in the Tanakh that say exactly these same words. But you read it in the King James, and that's what it says. "What is that between you and I, woman? My time hath not arrived." It just sounds so nasty. I don't know what it means. "What to you and me, woman?" That's what it says. "What to you and me, woman? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he tells you, do it." I guess because he shut her up, because he was so nasty, she goes, "Whatever he says, do it." That's what it sounds like to me. It sounds just nasty. This is not good. Yeah. Unless it doesn't mean what it sounds like, which I think is what's going on. I think we don't understand the verses. His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he tells you, do it." Now, there were 6 stone water pots standing there for the Jewish custom of purification. Why would there be stone water pots for the Jewish custom of purification? Which one? Jews they don't like go up to some water pot and go, "Baruch atah Adonai Elohim." There's no such thing in Judaism. There's no such thing. Never was, never will be. There's only one stone water pot that's used for purification of the Jews.
Would it be where one of the watches were?
Well, let's find out. Question was, would it be where one of the watches were? So Yeshua said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." So they filled them up to the brim. And he said, "Now draw out some of the water, take it to the chief of the room." And they took it. Now when the chief of the room tasted the water, which had become wine, and he didn't know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the chief of the room called the groom and said to him, "Everybody serves the good wine first. And when the guests, they're well drunk," is what it says in Greek, well drunk. Doesn't mean drunk like Gentiles think of the word drunk. When they're well drunk, Rava, not shakar. Rava means satiated, sated. Not shakar, not shikar, not drunk. "Yeah, there's a great party, man. Woo! Gonna get me some tonight." I've heard that a million times in Christian weddings. It's not like that. They're Rava, they're satisfied. After that, then the poorer is served. But you kept the good wine until now. So what part of the 7 days of the festival is it? Is it toward the beginning of the 7 days or toward the end of the 7 days? It's toward the end of the 7 days because he said, everybody serves the good stuff first. You saved it till now. What a waste. Everybody's already well drunk. At the end of the Sheva Yamim, this beginning of signs Yeshua did in Cana of Galilee and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Okay, he revealed his glory by that? Now, if there was such a thing as a stone water pot where Jews would go up in every house and Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim, and they say the prayer for washing the hands, and then they go eat. If that such a thing existed, at the minimum, he turned dirty water into wine. People have been washing their hands in that mess. At a minimum, it's filthy water. Right? Worse than that. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. So why does it say the third day? Here's why. John 1, you've got to go back to John 1. You read from 19 through 28. then verse 29, then verse 35 through 36, then verse 43. And they all say this, day 1. This is the testimony of John when the Jews sent priests and Levites to him from Jerusalem, saying, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord." Just like it says in Isaiah chapter 40. Then it says, the next day, he saw you. The next day after what? After the first day. So day 1 is John 1:19, all the way through verse 43. Then day 2, 19 through 28. Then day 2 is verse 29. The next day he saw Yeshua coming to him and said, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." 2 days in a row he said it. Now we go to verse 35 through 36. Again, the next day. What day is it? 3. Again, the next day, John was standing with 2 of his disciples, and he looked as Yeshua walked and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God." He said it 2 days in a row. Same exact thing. Day 2 and day 3. Now we're in verse 43. The next day. What day is it? 4th day. He decided to go to Galilee. Where is he? He's down in Judea or Judah. He's in Yehuda, in Judah, below Jerusalem, which is about a 3-day walk to Galilee. So that's the last thing it says in John 1. And then it says the 3rd day. So what day is it? It went day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and then the next verse says, and on the 3rd day, what day is it? Here, guys, it says day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and then it says, and the 3rd day, what day is it? Can you count that? Can you see it? Why is he talking to us like children? Because you're talking to me like children. 7 days. Come on, guys, wake up. It's the 7th day. Now, in the Bible, when you read a narrative, 100% of the time, on the 7th day of that narrative, there's going to be a picture of, guess what? The kingdom, the 7th day, the day of the Lord. And that's what's happening here. Okay. And on the 7th day, we'll say, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. So it's a picture of God marrying Israel in the day of the Lord. And the mother of Yeshua was there. Why does it say that? That's not information we really needed, is it? Why? Why does it say it? And the mother of Yeshua was there. Because it says, and both Yeshua and his disciples were invited to the wedding. So why does it pick out Miriam and say, and Miriam, the mother of Yeshua, was there? Right. It was a family wedding. On Miriam's side, on Yeshua's mother's side. So who was Miriam? Where'd she come from? Luke chapter 1, talking about talking about John, the birth of John. And 1:5 and then verse 26 through 36 says, a priest named Zechariah of the division of Avia. There's that word division, the course, the mishmarim, the watches. He's from the watch or the course of Avia. And he had a wife from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elisheva. Now in the 6th month, what month would that be? You'd think it's Elul, right? It's not talking about Elul. It's going to tell you which 6th month it's talking about. Now in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city in Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin of the seed of David. Don't be afraid, Miriam. You will conceive in your womb and give birth to a son, and you shall name him Yeshua. The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. For that reason, that's why the Holy Child will be called Ben Elohim, Son of God. Even your relative Elisheva. What? A priest is from what tribe? Levi. He's married to a woman of the daughters of Aaron. From what tribe? Levi. She has a baby. From what tribe? Levi. And now he goes to a city in Judah from the seed of David. What tribe is that? Judah. And it's Miriam, and God says, your relative Elizabeth. Your relative, the priests. There's no intermarriage in Judaism between tribes. God says very clearly, you shall not intermarry between the tribes so that you do not lose your tribal inheritance. Okay? But throughout the entire history of the Bible, which I wrote a book about, I'm going to give a plug for it. It's called the Judah-Levi Link, and it has what I've found, it's probably not all, but what I think is all of the instances in the Bible where Judah, at the highest level of the family of the king, and Levi, at the highest level of the family of the high priest, intermarries over and over and over and over again. And God said, do not intermarry between the tribes. And so what does God do? Let's have Judah and Levi intermarry over and over and over again. Now, if you're looking at the Bible as laws, you've got a huge problem. So that means God broke his law. God broke the law over and over again. So this is really important. This is why Yeshua can be the priest king. Because Miriam is from the tribe, two tribes, the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Levi. But Joseph, his daddy, is not. Only Miriam is. That's why she was invited. That's why it says, and Miriam, the mother of Yeshua, was there. Because it's in her family, the priests. This is a priestly family, or at a very minimum, a Levite family. Definitely from the tribe of Levi. Look what it says. Your relative Elizabeth herself has conceived a son in her old age, and she who was called infertile is now in her, what does it say? That's the 6th month it's talking about. Okay, so here's the watches. And here's the land divided into its tribes. And God said, give 48 cities to the Levites and priests so they can be distributed throughout all of Israel. Numbers 35, the cities which you shall give to the Levites. Is this in the Torah portion next week or 2 weeks from now? It's either next week or 2 weeks from now. The cities which you shall give to the Levites, 6 cities of refuge for the one who commits manslaughter, so he can flee there. In addition to that, 42 cities. The total cities which you are to give to the Levites will be 48 cities. So take more from the larger, fewer from the smaller. Each shall give Levi cities in proportion to his inheritance. Joshua 21, here's when they did it. Say it again. 2 weeks. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Joshua 21. Then, for the families of Kahat, these are the priests, 13 cities were given from the tribe of Judah. Here's Judah. Here's Judah down here. Here's Simeon. Across the river is Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh. Above Judah is Benjamin, Dan, Ephraim, and Manasseh. And above those guys is Galilee. Asher, Naphtali, Zebulun. Thank you. Issachar. So this says, for the Kohanim, give them cities from Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin. Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin. And here's Jerusalem, right here. So why does he put the priests there? Because it's closest to the temple. But they're distributed throughout all of Judah, Benjamin, and Simeon. To the rest of the sons of Kahat, 10 cities from Ephraim and Dan and Manasseh. Dan and Manasseh. So we're getting very close to Galilee, but we're not. It's not Galilee. Those cities go all the way up here to the border of Galilee, but they don't go into the Galilee. Now these are the Kohanim. These are the priestly cities. And to the sons of Gershon. Now these are Levite cities. To the sons of Gershon, 13 from Issachar, Asher, and Naphtali. Where is it? Issachar, Asher, and Naphtali. That is very definitely Galilee. And from Manasseh to the sons of Merari. Here are the other Levite cities. 12 from Reuben, Gad, and Zebulun. Reuben, Gad, and then across the river, Zebulun, right there. Now, Cana of Galilee is right, it's either in Issachar or Zebulun. There's an argument about where the border is. It's either in Issachar or Zebulun. Now, were there Levite cities in Issachar and Zebulun? Hello? Hello? Come on, wake up, guys. Were there Levitical cities in Issachar and Zebulun? Yes. Okay, looks like I've lost y'all. Looks like I've lost you. We got about, I'm going to say 10, 12 minutes to go. So take a big, deep breath. Hold on. Take a big, deep breath. Come back to me. Come back to me. Here, I'll talk to you like Christians. Put your thinking caps on, boys and girls. Come on. Come back to me. Think about what we're doing. Think about what we've looked at. And when I ask a question, just let's do it and let's move on. But I need you thinking, or else you're going to miss this. Were there Cohen cities, priestly cities in Issachar and Zebulun? Yes. Priestly cities? Yes. No. No. Were there Levitical cities in Issachar and Zebulun? Yes. Yes. Were there priestly cities there? No. No. Were there Levitical cities there? Yes. Okay, good. Yes, ma'am.
Why is Manasseh so big?
Because God liked him.
Why is what?
Why is Manasseh so big?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's the biggest.
Don't worry about it. It's a different thing altogether.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't even get you guys to follow what I'm saying right now. Yes.
What?
Honey, I can't hear you. No, yes, the priest came from the Levites, but it's a separate family. Remember, it gave us the families here. The families of Kahat, you'll probably see it in your Bible as Kohath. The family of Kahat is the priest, only that family. The other two families, Gershon and Merari, that's the rest of Levi, which is the Levites. That's Gershon and Merari. Yeah, they're three separate families. Kahat is the priest, Gershon and Merari, the Levites. Make sense? Okay. Good question, by the way. So, look at this. These are stone vessels. They have found thousands and thousands of these. Guess where they find them? Jerusalem. And, well, I haven't told you why stone is important yet, so maybe you won't know. They find them in Jerusalem, and guess where else they find them? All over.
In the what cities?
In the cities of the Levites and priests. And here's why. Everything on this planet transfers, delivers uncleanness, except one thing. Stone. Only one thing. Remember I told you that this bridge, you probably can't remember it so long ago. Remember I said that this bridge is important? What they call the red heifer bridge? I said it was important. Look at it carefully. It's made out of arches. Arches of stone, obviously stone. Why arches? Because that way you have less mass, you have less part of the bridge touching the ground. What if there's a dead body buried? It'll transfer uncleanness. Now, it's hard for it to transfer through stone. That's why things were made out of stone, to protect it from being unclean. But if you make arches, what's it going to do? Travel up, go over here and go over like that? It won't happen. It just cannot happen. Uncleanness doesn't do that. Uncleanness transfers immediately in a direct path. It's like energy. It's like electricity. So there has to be something to direct it or move it. And so everything in Jerusalem, their whole purpose was to be clean before God. So what do you think they made all their stuff out of? Stone. And they find these all over Jerusalem. And this is really amazing work, these stone vessels. Look at these. See that? That's made by a lathe. You know, they turn wood on a lathe. They turn stone in the 1st century. And by the way, before the 1st century, the Jews turned stone on a lathe. So did the Romans and the Greeks, by the way. That's how they made columns. This is from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem. These are the new stone vessels for the ashes of the red heifer, for the first step of the ashes of the red heifer, when they have small water. This is an original mortar and pestle that they found in Jerusalem at the temple, where they would use to grind the ashes and the bones for the ashes of the red heifer. And here's a couple of cups they found with it, made out of stone. Stone is really important to this story because it doesn't contract uncleanness. Look at what this says again. His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he tells you, do it." Now, I don't really know what was going on here. That, you know, the way it's translated. What does that have to do with me and you, woman? Whatever he does say. I don't know what that is. I assume that she's in on the joke. That's all I can assume. Because she says, hey guys, whatever he tells you to do, do it. This is going to be good. That's how I'm seeing it now. Guys, whatever he says to you, my son, Yeshua, he's going to tell you to do some really weird stuff. Whatever he does, do it. This is going to be wild. That's how I see it now. I might be wrong, but that's how I see it. Now, there were 6 stone water pots standing there for the Jewish custom of purification. I would submit to you that this must be the house of a Levite, not a priest, a Levite. And they're related to Miriam. So maybe there's some relation to the priests there. But there's no Levitical cities for the priests in Issachar and Zebulun. But there are priestly cities just below in Manasseh. Right, and that's maybe 6-7 miles. That's it. So maybe it's kind of like El Paso, Juarez. Maybe. That there's like sister cities. But I can't prove it. But I do know what those stone water pots for the purification of the Jews is. Because that water the ashes were ground up, put in water, and then the priest distributed them to the watches. So this is a watch city. Yes, ma'am.
The 6 stone water pots, is that a picture of the 6 days?
Yes. This is a picture of the 6 days. What day is it in the story? 7th. So you have 6,000 years of Adam's sin of death, and death is sin. Death is a sin. It's the worst sin, the sin of Adam. And he says, fill them up even bigger. Fill it up. Fill it up to the brim. 6,000 years worth of filthy, dirty, dead cow ash water. Now I'm going to turn that into something you can drink. Isn't that weird? That's what he's doing. That's why this is such a big deal. He takes his filthy, disgusting death water from a dead cow and ashes and, God only knows, and fills it up, all 6. It's a filling up of the 6,000 years. And then comes the kingdom, the day of the Lord, the 7th day. So that's why this is such a big deal. Anyone touching the corpse in a human soul who does not purify himself defiles Adonai's tabernacle, and that person will be cut off from Israel, because the cleansing water was not sprinkled on him. He's unclean. His uncleanness will remain on him. So he can't go up before God. So there's got to be a way to distribute this dead cow ash water throughout all of Israel. And this is how they did it. Did you have a question?
Question.
Yeah.
What about the people that
Yeah, putting the ashes of a dead person in an urn, it's just more uncleanness. That's all. Yeah, that's like saying, I ate pepperoni today. Okay, good for you. I ate baby back ribs. They're both unclean. I mean, it's just a different form. There's no difference. It's a wrong picture for sure. Yes, it makes the house unclean, makes everybody who comes in it unclean. It's all touching or affected by the effects of death. But remember, it's a picture. It's the wrong picture. Yeah, and it just keeps going on and on and on. Now, don't forget the sin of death. He says, place them outside the camp. He divided it into 3 parts. One was on the Mount of Olives. One was divided among the watches, the mishmarot. Of course, is the priest and Levites. So what he did was he took the ultimate uncleanness, which is what?
Sin.
What's the ultimate uncleanness? Sin of death. And he flopped it on its head and turned it into the ultimate joy. What's the ultimate joy? A Jewish wedding. We want wine at a Jewish wedding. That's the ultimate joy. I mean, that is the most joyful thing in our lives anyway. Simcha, right. And what festival is the most joyous? Sukkot. You get, no, not Rosh Hashanah. Sukkot. You're supposed to have simcha, simcha. Joy and only joy, right? And Sukkot is the ultimate picture of what? The kingdom. The kingdom. It's the festival for all the 70 nations. It's when all the nations come up to God. All right, so it's an ultimate picture of the kingdom. So what he does is he takes the ultimate uncleanness. He takes the ultimate uncleanness and turns it into the ultimate picture of joy in the kingdom. Fill the stone water pots with water. Fill it up even more. And yes.
Why did he do it before he died?
He didn't just do it before he died, he did it as the very, very first picture. Yes, so why did he do it as the very, very first picture? That's the question. That's what you're asking, yes? Okay, I already said. It's the ultimate picture of taking the sin of death, and turning it into the kingdom, which is his whole ministry. That's what he was going to do in 3 years. He was going to take all sin and then remove the sin of Adam for those who want it, and then take us to the kingdom. That's his whole ministry. And it's kind of like setting the tone of the whole thing. Isn't it? It's like the bookend, the first bookend. Yeah.
Does that mean that the sin of death will also be taken away prior to the coming of the kingdom?
No. The sin of death is taken away after the birth pangs. I'm trying to think of what date. I can't remember what date. After the birth pangs in the day of the Lord. So the year 6008. And there's a certain date on which it takes place. I can't remember.
That happens during the wedding. This is not like, oh, and they were preparing for the wedding and then he made the creative wine. It's during the wedding.
What part of the wedding is this during? The end. Why? Because I think it's the 7th day of the wedding. Why? Because it's at the end of days. It's the day of the Lord at the end of the 6,000 years. I can't hear you. No, after the Day of Atonement. Sukkot. So, yes. So he says,
You think this was during Sukkot when this happened?
no. So they filled them up to the brim, because if it was Sukkot, where would they be? In Jerusalem. So they filled them up to the brim, filling up the 6,000 years, and he said to them, draw out now and take to the head server. And they took. Now when the head server, now I put my own translation in here. When the head server tasted the water of dead cow ashes to remove the sin of death, which had become wine, that's how you should read this when you read it, because that's what it is. The chief of the room called the groom and said, you know, everybody serves the good wine first, and when the guests are well drunk, then the poor wine. But you saved the good wine, the stuff that really makes you joyful and tastes great, to the end of the Sheva Yamim, the 7 days of the festival, 7 days of the wedding. This is from Isaiah 12:3. Ushavtem mayim b'sason mima'aneha Yeshua. That's why we sang it. Ushavtem mayim b'sason mima'aneha Yeshua. Say it with me. Ushavtem mayim b'sason mima'aneha Yeshua. Do it again. Ushavtem mayim b'sason mima'aneha Yeshua. I'm going to keep saying do it again until you do it. Do it again. Ushavtem mayim b'sason mima'aneha Yeshua. It's right here. Try it again. Ushavtem mayim b'sason mima'aneha Yeshua. Now I did it 6 times. If you can't do it after 6 times, you're not trying. You got to make some effort. You got to make some. Okay, let's do it slower. Let's do it slower. That's fine. Ushavtem mayim b'sason mima'aneha Yeshua. Do it again. Ushavtem mayim b'sason mima'aneha Yeshua. Now this is directly from Isaiah 12:3. Therefore you will joyously, what? Draw forth water from the well of Yeshua. And what does he tell them? He says, fill it up to the brim, and then he tells them to do what? Draw out water and bring it to the head dude. And he's living Isaiah 12:3, right in front of him. And if you don't think some of the guys knew, or some of the people didn't know what he was doing, you're wrong. I know some of them understood what he was doing. Exactly. I mean, I would think they'd be like this. Oh my God, what are you doing? Are you out of your mind? But they got it. I'm sure they got it. It's heavy? This is how he did it. Yeah. It's a big joke. And if you don't think he was being mischievous, oh my God, what chutzpah for him to do this. For him to take dead cow ash water and that would, you dip hyssop in it and sprinkle it on people that are dead. Hold on. And flip that right side up and say, no, this is the best wine you can get. This is incredibly mischievous. Yes? Wait. Okay, way off topic. That's a different thing.
No, but I'm saying that because of that, God allows the shalom or shalom made.
Way off topic. So this is it's a different picture. That's sota. That's the woman caught or accused of adultery. Different water, different picture. I thought about this. Different water, different picture. That does not have ashes put into it. It does not have death put into it. This does. This is nothing but death. But that, sota, you're scraping off the words of God, ink, into it. So that's a different picture. So try to shift your thinking from that to just this. It is a different picture. I want you to see it like this. This is how I want you to see Yeshua. Because this is mischief at its best. How do you say mischievous in Spanish? Traviesa. Travieso. This is travieso par excellence. I mean, this is a big joke. And this is why I think Miriam said what she said. I think she was in on it. Hey, look, whatever he tells you to do, it's going to sound weird. Just do it. Just do it. This is going to be good.
Michael, do we know that Yeshua for a fact did not perform any miracles prior to this at home?
I don't know anything except what it says. I don't know anything but what it says. All right, so let's read it. Let's read it with understanding in it. And you can go with this or not go with this. This is I think I've firmly established each point enough to do it, to say this. He tasted the water of dead cow ashes to remove the sin of death, which had become very good wine. And then the head waiter guy said, every man serves the good wine first. And when the guests are sated and joyful, then the poorer wine. But you have drawn out from the ultimate unclean water the excellent wine of joy and Yeshua, salvation, at the end of the 7 days. And that's why I have this here. Let's do it again in Hebrew. I'll do it slow. Ushavtem mayim besason mima'anei ha-Yeshua. And draw out water in joy from the springs of Yeshua, from the springs of salvation. And it's sung at Sukkot. This is sung at Sukkot. So no, I don't think it was Sukkot, or else they'd have been up at Jerusalem, but I sure think he's acting out the picture of Sukkot in the day of the Lord. So I think that we can definitely say that Yeshua was a trip. That's my bottom line. Yeshua was a trip. He was so mischievous. A prankster. Lenny Bruce used to say, he was the first stand-up comedian, Jewish. Got arrested over and over again. And he used to say, God is a stand-up comedian and everybody's afraid to laugh. Right. And that's true. It is holy. These works that Jesus did show his glory and that he is holy. No, he is messing with people and he's laughing about it so that he can show people the Torah is not, serious and you got to do everything just right. Do it and it'll talk to you and you get to know God. You get to know God. And it's a trip. It's fun. Let's stand for the, whatever we're going to do. The Aleinu. Thank you. I forgot what it's called. Stand for the Aleinu. Thank you, Lord, for the way you are. And at least, it's hard to, but we can sort of figure out sometimes when you're playing jokes and when you're trying to have fun and when you want us to experience and see the way things really are. And I thank you that your Ruach is revealing this to other people. Other people are seeing it. And I ask that you would reveal it more and more and more so that people would turn their face and their eyes and their heart and their ears toward Judaism, toward your way, so they could get to know you and enjoy a good, tight relationship with you. Thank you, Abba. Amen. Let's say the Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, l'tet gedula l'yotzer bereshit, shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu k'kol hamonam. Let us adore the Lord of all, who in greatness created the world from of old, that he has not made us like the nations of the earth, not made us like the families of the land, not made our destiny like theirs, has not cast our lot with all of them. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol ha'aretz b'yom hahu yiyeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. And it is said, the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day, the Lord shall be one, and his name one. Va'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malachei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. And we bend the knee and bow in worship, thanks to the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed is he. We acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. There's nothing but him, As Torah says, know that the Lord, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Ein od milvado. There is nothing else but him. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to come down here. The way we do Kiddush is we all come down here. We get some wine or grape juice, whatever you want, and a piece of bread, and then we say the prayers together. We all come down here together.